The lights of Denver International Airport hummed overhead as 26-year-old Helda McDaniels stood frozen beside Terminal B's departure gate, her boarding pass trembling in her hand. Behind her, the man she'd married 18 months ago was walking away with his mother, their matching designer luggage rolling in perfect synchronization toward a different gate entirely. The honeymoon to Hawaii she'd planned and saved for, gone. The marriage she'd believed in, crumbling with each step he took away from her. But what Helda didn't know in that moment of devastation was that this wasn't her ending. It was her beginning.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Helda McDaniels had always been the kind of person who followed the script. At 26, she had checked off what she thought were life's essential boxes. Graduated from Colorado State University with a degree in elementary education, landed a teaching job at Riverside Elementary in Fort Collins, married her college sweetheart, Marcus Thompson, and moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment that Marcus had chosen because it was practical. Standing in her tiny kitchen that Tuesday morning in March, preparing Marcus's coffee exactly how he liked it, 2 sugars, splash of cream, stirred counterclockwise, Helda caught her reflection in the microwave door. Her auburn hair was pulled back in the same low ponytail she'd worn since college, and her clothes hung loose on her small frame. She'd lost weight over the past months without trying, a fact that should have concerned her but somehow felt like the least of her problems. The apartment around her told the story of a life lived in compromise. The beige walls were Marcus's choice, neutral and inoffensive, he'd said. The furniture was practical rather than beautiful, selected by his mother, Eleanor Thompson, during a weekend shopping trip that Helda had been excluded from. "We know what works best, dear," Eleanor had explained, with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. Even the wedding photos displayed on the mantel had been chosen by Eleanor, featuring mostly shots where Marcus looked handsome and Helda appeared slightly out of focus. Helda's own touches were relegated to corners, a small succulent on the windowsill that she'd rescued from a clearance rack, a stack of children's books she'd bought with her own money for lesson planning, and a single-framed photo of her and her late grandmother tucked behind Marcus's laptop. These items felt like apologies for taking up space in what was supposed to be their shared home. Her phone buzzed with a text from her teaching assistant, Jamie Rodriguez. "Can't wait to see your pictures from Hawaii. The kids are so excited to hear about your trip when you get back." Helda smiled despite herself. Her 4th grade class at Riverside Elementary was the brightest part of her days. 22 little faces that lit up when she walked into the room, eager minds that hung on her every word during story time, and small hands that reached for her when they needed comfort or help. At school, she wasn't Marcus's quiet wife or Eleanor's disappointing daughter-in-law. She was Miss McDaniels, and she mattered. The Hawaii trip had been Helda's idea entirely. She'd spent months researching the perfect honeymoon they'd never taken, squirreling away money from her modest teaching salary, and planning every detail. Marcus had seemed enthusiastic, or at least he'd nodded and said sounds good when she'd shown him the resort brochures and excursion options. Eleanor, however, had been less supportive. "Hawaii is so far, Marcus," she'd said during one of their weekly dinners at her sprawling house in the suburbs, "and expensive. Wouldn't a nice weekend in Aspen be more sensible? I have connections at several lovely hotels there." But for once, Helda had held firm. "It's our belated honeymoon, Mrs. Thompson. We've been planning this for months." Eleanor's laugh had been light, but sharp. "Oh, Helda, always such grand plans. Well, I suppose you young people need to learn about budgeting the hard way." The comment had stung, particularly because Helda had been the one doing all the budgeting. She'd taken on extra tutoring sessions after school, sold some of her grandmother's jewelry, and even picked up weekend shifts at a local bookstore to afford the trip. Marcus contributed nothing financially, explaining that his job at his uncle's insurance firm didn't pay enough for luxuries. Now, sipping her own coffee from a chipped mug, the good mugs were reserved for when Eleanor visited, Helda reviewed their itinerary one more time. 7 days in Maui, with an ocean view room at the Grand Wailea, snorkeling tours, a sunset dinner cruise, and a couple's massage she'd booked as a surprise. The total cost had been $3,000, every penny of which had come from her own efforts. Marcus emerged from the bedroom already dressed in the polo shirt his mother had bought him for the trip. He barely glanced at the coffee she'd prepared, instead immediately checking his phone. Mom texted, "She's worried about the flight connections. You know how nervous flying makes her." Helda frowned. Flying makes her nervous, but she's not... "She decided yesterday that she wants to come with us," Marcus interrupted, still scrolling through his phone. "Her book club trip to Sedona got canceled, and she's already taken the time off work. It makes perfect sense." The coffee mug slipped slightly in Helda's hands. "Come with us? Marcus, this is our honeymoon."
"It's just a vacation, Helda, and Mom rarely gets to travel. She's already booked her ticket for the same flight. Isn't that great? She got the last seat in first class."
First class? Helda's voice came out smaller than she intended. Their seats were in economy, the most she could afford after months of saving. Marcus finally looked up from his phone, his expression mildly annoyed at having to explain. "Well, yes, she can't sit in coach, Helda. Her back problems, remember? Besides, she's paying for her own ticket and hotel room. It's not costing us anything extra." But it was costing them everything, Helda realized. The romantic dinners she'd planned, the couples' activities, the chance to reconnect after months of feeling like strangers sharing the same space. All of it would now include Eleanor's running commentary and disapproving glances. "I wish you would talk to me first," Helda said quietly. Marcus shrugged, already moving toward the door. "Mom doesn't need permission to take a vacation, Helda. We should probably get going. You know how she feels about being late." The ride to the airport was tense, with Marcus driving his mother's pristine sedan, while Helda sat in the back seat like a child being driven to school. Eleanor, perfectly coiffed and dressed in a cream-colored travel outfit that probably cost more than Helda's monthly salary, held court from the passenger seat. "I've already spoken to the concierge at the Grand Waila. They have a lovely suite available right next to your room, ocean view, of course. I'll be able to keep an eye on you two lovebirds." Her laugh sounded like wind chimes in a thunderstorm. At the airport, the dynamic became even clearer. Eleanor swept through security and toward the first-class lounge like she owned the place, while Marcus trotted along beside her carrying her carry-on bag. Helda followed behind, struggling with both her suitcase and Marcus's, wondering when she had become the porter in her own marriage. "I'll catch up with you at the gate," Marcus called over his shoulder as he disappeared into the first-class lounge with his mother. "They have better coffee in here." Helda found herself alone at gate B7, surrounded by other couples excitedly discussing their Hawaiian adventures. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos from her classroom, pictures of her students' artwork and their gap-toothed smiles. These children saw her as someone important, someone worth listening to and learning from. But sitting in that airport chair, watching other wives laugh with their husbands and plan their romantic getaways, she felt invisible. When boarding began and Marcus finally emerged from the lounge, he seemed different somehow, more distant. He barely acknowledged her as they joined the line, instead focusing on ensuring his mother had everything she needed for the flight. "Marcus," Helda said softly as they shuffled toward the gate agent, "can we talk about how this trip is going to work? I mean, I had planned some special things for just us." "Helda, really?" Marcus's voice carried an edge of irritation that made several other passengers glance their way. "Can't you just be flexible for once? Mom rarely gets opportunities like this. The least you can do is be gracious about it." The words hit her like a physical blow. Be gracious. About having her honeymoon hijacked? About being treated like an afterthought in her own marriage? About watching her months of planning and saving become a mother-son bonding trip? As they reached the gate agent, Marcus and Eleanor moved toward the first-class line, while Helda stood frozen with the economy passengers. The distance between them felt like more than just airline seating arrangements. It felt like a chasm that had been widening for months, and she was only now seeing how wide it had become. This was Helda's current reality,
a woman who had spent so long accommodating others that she had forgotten she deserved to take up space in her own life. But sometimes the most profound changes begin with the most devastating moments. And for Helda McDaniels, that moment was about to arrive at 30,000 feet.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The Boeing 737 had been cruising at altitude for 2 hours when Eleanor Thompson made her move. Helda was 3 rows behind in economy, trying to focus on grading papers she'd brought along, when she heard the commotion from first class. A flight attendant hurried past her toward the front of the plane, medical kit in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there's a doctor on board, please press your call button immediately," came the announcement over the intercom. Helda's stomach dropped. She unbuckled her seatbelts and made her way forward, pushing past other concerned passengers until she reached the first-class cabin. There she found Eleanor dramatically fanned by 2 flight attendants, one hand pressed to her forehead, while Marcus knelt beside her seat, his face pale with worry. "What happened?" Helda asked, reaching for Eleanor's wrist to check her pulse, a skill she'd learned when one of her students had seizures. "Oh, Helda, dear," Eleanor said weakly, though her pulse felt strong and steady. "I'm having such terrible chest pains, and my breathing, it's so difficult at this altitude." Dr. Patricia Kim, a cardiologist returning from a medical conference, arrived and began examining Eleanor. After several minutes of checking vitals and asking questions, she spoke quietly with the flight attendants. Helda caught fragments: anxiety response, altitude sensitivity, and not life-threatening but concerning for extended flight. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a medical situation, we'll be making an emergency landing in Phoenix. We apologize for the inconvenience and will have you on your way as soon as possible." As the plane began its descent, Eleanor gripped Marcus's hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I've ruined everything. But I don't think I can continue to Hawaii. The doctor says the long flight over the ocean might be too much for my heart." Marcus immediately went into protective son mode. "Don't worry about anything, Mom. Your health comes first. We'll get you home safely." "We?" Helda asked, though she already knew the answer from the look on Marcus's face. "I can't leave my mother alone in Phoenix when she's having health issues. Helda, you understand that, right?" Dr. Kim, overhearing the conversation, approached them. "Mrs. Thompson, your symptoms appear to be stress and altitude-related. With proper rest and maybe some anti-anxiety medication, you should be fine to continue traveling, though I'd recommend staying at lower altitudes for a few days." But Eleanor shook her head dramatically. No, I couldn't possibly risk it. Marcus, could you help me get home? I'm just too frightened to travel alone after this episode." The plane touched down at Phoenix Sky Arbor International Airport, and as they disembarked, Helda felt like she was watching her marriage play out in slow motion. At the gate, Marcus was already on his phone rebooking flights back to Denver for himself and his mother. "What about Hawaii?" Helda asked, standing beside their luggage as other passengers rushed past to catch connecting flights. Marcus barely looked up from his phone. "Obviously we can't go now, Helda. Mom needs to get home and see her own doctor. I'm sure the resort will understand and refund the money." "Actually, they won't," Helda said quietly. "It's a non-refundable reservation. I already checked the policy." Eleanor, who had miraculously recovered enough to supervise the rebooking process, overheard this. "Well, that's unfortunate, dear, but surely you can see that Marcus's place is with his family during a health crisis. You wouldn't want him to be the kind of son who abandons his mother when she's sick, would you?" The manipulation was so smooth, so perfectly executed, that Helda almost admired its artistry. Eleanor had orchestrated the entire situation. The sudden decision to join the trip, the convenient first-class medical emergency, and the dramatic recovery that was just incomplete enough to require Marcus's presence. "I'll go alone then," Helda heard herself say. The words surprised her. She hadn't planned to say them. Marcus finally looked at her directly. "Alone? Helda, that's ridiculous. You can't go to Hawaii by yourself. Just cancel the whole thing."
Why is it ridiculous? The question came out stronger than she intended. I planned the entire trip. I paid for it. Why can't I go? Because married people don't take vacations alone. What would people think? What would people think about a husband who abandons his wife at an airport for a medical emergency that required no medical intervention? The words came from somewhere deep inside Helda, a place she'd forgotten existed. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, the helpless invalid mask slipping for just a moment. Marcus, perhaps you should explain to your wife that family obligations come before pleasure trips. But something had shifted in Helda during that plane ride, watching Eleanor's performance and Marcus's complete willingness to be manipulated. All those months of feeling invisible, of accommodating, of shrinking herself to fit into spaces others had designed for her, it crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. You know what, Marcus? Go home with your mother, take care of her, but I'm going to Hawaii. Helda, be reasonable.
I am being reasonable. For the first time in a long time, I'm being completely reasonable. She pulled out her phone and called the airline. Hi, I need to change a ticket from Phoenix to Maui. Yes, I'll hold. Marcus stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. You're serious about this? Dead serious. The customer service representative came back on the line, and Helda discovered there was a flight to Honolulu leaving in 3 hours with a connection to Maui. There was even a seat available in first class, where Eleanor's unused ticket could be transferred. While Marcus and Eleanor waited for their delayed flight to Denver, Helda found herself in an airport restaurant, eating a mediocre Caesar salad and processing what had just happened. Her phone buzzed with texts from Marcus. This is childish. Mom is really upset. You're embarrassing our family. Just come home and we'll plan another trip later. She turned off her phone and opened her email, logging into her email for the first time since arriving at the airport that morning. There, in her inbox, was a message from her principal, Dr. Sarah Martinez. Helda, I hope you're enjoying your vacation. I wanted to let you know that the district received another commendation letter about you from a parent. Mrs. Chen wrote a beautiful note about how you helped her daughter Sophia overcome her reading difficulties. She said you stayed after school every day for 2 months, never charging extra, and now Sophia is reading above grade level. Teachers like you are why I love this job. Enjoy Hawaii. You've earned it. Helda stared at the email, feeling something crack open inside her chest. When was the last time Marcus had praised her effort? When had he ever acknowledged her dedication to her students, her ability to transform a struggling reader into a confident one? When had anyone in her personal life made her feel as valued as this email did? She thought about Sophia Chen, a shy 8-year-old who had started the year convinced she was stupid because reading was hard for her. Helda had seen something in Sophia that the little girl couldn't see in herself: potential, intelligence, worth. Day after day, Helda had patiently worked with her, celebrated small victories, and refused to give up even when Sophia wanted to quit. I did that, Helda whispered to herself. I changed that little girl's life. The realization hit her like a physical force. She had been doing for her students what no one had been doing for her, seeing their worth, nurturing their potential, refusing to let them settle for less than they deserved. For 2 years, she had been Sophia Chen in her own marriage, convinced she wasn't worth much, accepting crumbs of attention and affection. But Sophia had learned to read above grade level because someone believed in her and refused to accept limitations. What could Helda accomplish if she started believing in herself the same way? A voice came over the airport intercom. Flight 847 to Honolulu, now boarding first-class passengers. Helda gathered her things, her hands steadier than they'd been all day. As she walked toward the gate, she passed Marcus and Eleanor at their departure area.
Marcus was on his phone with someone, probably his uncle, explaining why he wasn't going to Hawaii. Eleanor was reading a magazine, looking perfectly healthy and completely satisfied with how the day had unfolded. Neither of them noticed Helda walk by. At the gate, the flight attendant scanned Helda's boarding pass and smiled. "First class to Honolulu. Lucky you. Vacation or business?" "Actually," she said, surprised by the strength in her own voice, "it's the beginning of something new." As she settled into her first-class seat, ironically the same seat Eleanor had booked for herself, Helda felt something she hadn't experienced in months: excitement about what came next. She was flying toward an unknown future, alone but not lonely, scared but not paralyzed. The plane pushed back from the gate just as the sun was setting over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Helda pressed her face to the window and watched Phoenix shrink below her, carrying away the life she'd been living and the woman she'd been pretending to be. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, 39,000 feet above her old reality, Helda McDaniels began to remember who she was meant to become.
The Grand Wailea Resort sprawled before Helda like a fantasy made real, cascading waterfalls, exotic birds calling from tropical gardens, and the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon. But as she stood in the opulent lobby at 2 a.m. Hawaii time, jet-lagged and clutching her single suitcase, the magnitude of what she'd done began to crash over her like the waves she could hear in the distance. "Welcome to Maui, Mrs. McDaniels," the night clerk said with genuine warmth. "I see you have our honeymoon package. Congratulations. Your ocean view suite is ready, complete with champagne service and couples massage appointments for tomorrow." Couples massage. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Helda felt her cheeks burn as other late-arriving guests glanced her way, clearly wondering where her husband was. "Actually," she managed, "there's been a change. It's just me now." The clerk's professional smile never wavered, but Helda caught the slight pause, the quick glance at her wedding ring, the mental calculation of what story might explain a solo honeymoon. "Of course, ma'am. We'll adjust everything accordingly. Is there anything special I can help you with during your stay?" Her suite was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Wailea Beach, a marble bathroom with a soaking tub built for two, and a king-size bed adorned with rose petals arranged in the shape of a heart. A bottle of Veuve Clicquot sat chilling beside two crystal flutes, and chocolate-covered strawberries spelled out, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," on a silver tray. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd finally made it to paradise, and she'd never felt more alone. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop since she'd landed, but she'd been ignoring it during the taxi ride and check-in process. Now, in the privacy of her suite, she finally looked at the messages. Marcus: "I can't believe you actually got on that plane." Marcus: "Mom had to go to the ER. Real doctors, not just some random person on a plane." Marcus: "Her blood pressure is dangerously high. Are you happy now?" Eleanor: "Helda dear, I'm very disappointed in your behavior today. Marcus is beside himself with worry about both of us." Marcus: "Call me when you get this. We need to talk." Marcus: "Seriously, Helda, this is insane. Come home." There were 17 more messages along similar lines, each one designed to make her feel guilty, selfish, and wrong for choosing herself for once. But what struck her most was what wasn't there. Not a single message asking if she'd arrived safely, if she was okay, or even acknowledging that she might have feelings about what had happened. Her hands shaking slightly, she texted back, "Arrived safely. Need some time to think. We'll call you tomorrow." The response came immediately. "Time to think about what? Get on the first flight home. This isn't you, Helda." She stared at those words, "This isn't you." Marcus was right. The Helda he knew would never have gotten on that plane alone.
She would have docilely followed him and Eleanor back to Denver, apologized for being inconvenient, and spent the next month planning some other trip that would inevitably be canceled or hijacked by his family's needs. But as she looked around the luxury suite she'd worked 3 jobs to afford, a different thought occurred to her. Maybe the Helda he knew wasn't the real her at all. She poured herself a glass of champagne, something she never did at home, where Marcus preferred beer, and Eleanor thought alcohol before dinner was common. The bubbles tickled her nose as she stepped onto the private lanaya and breathed in the tropical night air. The beach below was empty except for couples walking hand in hand along the water edge. Their laughter drifted up to her balcony, and Helda felt the familiar ache of loneliness that had become her constant companion in her marriage. Even when Marcus was physically present, she often felt more alone than she did right now. Her laptop chimed with an email from her sister Rachel in Portland, someone she hadn't spoken to in months because Marcus found Rachel dramatic and Eleanor thought she was a bad influence. "Helda, just saw your Instagram post about Hawaii, which is weird because you never post anything, but I'm glad you did. The sunset photo is gorgeous. Hope you and Marcus are having an amazing time. Call me when you get back. I miss talking to you." Helda frowned and opened Instagram on her phone. Sure enough, there was a post from her account, a photo of the Arizona sunset she had taken through the airplane window, with the caption, "Sometimes the most beautiful views come after the most turbulent flights. Airplane sunset. #new beginnings." She had no memory of posting it. She must have done it during her layover in Phoenix, running on adrenaline and airplane coffee, but looking at it now, she barely recognized the sentiment as coming from her. When had she ever posted something so optimistic, so personal?
The post had 12 likes and 3 comments, more engagement than anything she'd ever shared. Her teaching colleague Kim had written, "So proud of you for taking this trip. You deserve all the beauty and adventure." A former college friend named Ashley had commented, "This doesn't sound like the Helda I remember, but I love it. Go, girl." Even her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had liked it, though the elderly woman usually only used Facebook to share photos of her cats. Rachel had also commented, "Who is this and what did you do with my uptight little sister? Seriously, though, this is beautiful. Can't wait to hear about your adventures." Uptight little sister. The description stung because it was accurate. When had she become that person? Cautious, anxious, always worried about making waves or disappointing others? She remembered being different in college, more spontaneous and confident. She'd been the one who convinced Rachel to go skydiving for her 21st birthday, the one who had organized impromptu road trips and stayed up all night having deep conversations about life and dreams. That version of herself felt like someone she'd read about in a book, rather than someone she'd actually been. Her phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. Marcus's contact photo filled the screen. A formal shot Eleanor had taken of him at his cousin's wedding, where he looked handsome but distant. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. On the 4th call, she answered. "Thank God," Marcus said immediately. "I've been worried sick. Mom's in the hospital, Helda. Her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels after you left. The doctors want to keep her overnight for observation." "I'm sorry she's not feeling well," Helda said carefully. "But Marcus, we both know her blood pressure spikes every time something doesn't go her way. Remember when the restaurant was out of her preferred wine last month? That's different, and you know it. This time it's serious. She's genuinely upset about what happened today, about how you treated her when she was having a medical emergency." Helda felt the familiar guilt trying to creep in, the well-trained response that made her apologize and accommodate. But sitting in her beautiful suite, with the sound of ocean waves in the background, something in her resisted. "Marcus, your mother wasn't having a medical emergency. The doctor on the plane confirmed that. She was having anxiety about flying over the ocean, which is completely understandable, but it wasn't life-threatening." "So now you're a doctor? You think you know better than my mother about her own health?" "I think your mother is very good at getting what she wants." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "I can't believe you just said that.
About my mother who's lying in a hospital bed right now? A hospital bed she chose to go to, Marcus, just like she chose to come on our honeymoon, just like she chose to have a panic attack that would require you to come home with her. You're being paranoid and cruel, Helda. This isn't like you at all. There it was again. This isn't like you. As if the version of her that questioned, that had opinions, that stood up for herself was somehow inauthentic or wrong. Maybe this is exactly like me, she said quietly. Maybe the person you think you know is the one that isn't real. What's that supposed to mean? Helda looked out at the moonlight dancing on the water, at the paradise she'd worked so hard to reach. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Helda, if you don't come home tomorrow, I don't know what's going to happen to us. The threat hung between them, unspoken but clear. Choose your marriage or choose yourself, but you can't have both. I know, she whispered and hung up the phone. For the first time in years, Helda McDaniels fell asleep without setting an alarm, without planning tomorrow's activities around someone else's needs, and without apologizing for taking up space in her own life. But as she drifted off to the sound of Hawaiian waves, her dreams were filled with doubt, guilt, and the frightening question of who she might become if she stopped being who everyone else needed her to be.
Helda woke to the sound of Hawaiian trade winds rustling through palm fronds and the distant crash of waves against volcanic rock. For a blissful moment, she forgot where she was and why, experiencing only the sensation of silk sheets against her skin and golden sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Then reality crashed back. Marcus, Eleanor, the abandoned honeymoon, the ultimatum hanging over her marriage like a storm cloud. Her phone showed 23 missed calls and 47 text messages accumulated overnight. Rather than read them, she turned the device face down on the nightstand and padded barefoot to her private lanai. The view took her breath away. Wailea Beach stretched before her like a crescent of powdered diamonds, with swimmers and snorkelers already exploring the crystal-clear waters. Palm trees swayed in the morning breeze, and the scent of plumeria blossoms drifted up from the resort gardens below. She had never seen anything so beautiful, and for the first time in months, she felt something approaching peace. A knock at her door interrupted the moment. Room service wheeled in a breakfast cart laden with tropical fruits, macadamia nut pancakes, and Kona coffee, along with a handwritten note from the resort manager. Mrs. McDaniels, we hope you're enjoying your stay. Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can do to make your vacation perfect. Aloha, David Nakamura. As she sipped her coffee, rich and complex in a way that made the grocery store branded home taste like water, Helda realized this was the first meal in months that she'd eaten without worrying about whether Marcus would approve of her choices or whether Eleanor would have comments about her portions. The couple's massage appointment was scheduled for 11 a.m. She could cancel it, she supposed, but the spa had probably already prepared for 2 people, and she'd lose the money anyway. More importantly, some rebellious part of her wanted to claim the experience she'd paid for, even if she had to claim it alone. At the Spa Grande, nestled in the resort's tropical gardens, Helda met her massage therapist, a serene woman named Leilani, whose gentle manner immediately put her at ease. Your husband couldn't join you today? Leilani asked as she led Helda to a private treatment room overlooking a koi pond. My husband couldn't join me at all, Helda said, surprising herself with her directness. He chose to go home with his mother instead. Leilani's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained professionally neutral. I see. Well, sometimes we need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. The ancient Hawaiians believed that self-love was the foundation of all other love. As Leilani's skilled hands worked tension from muscles Helda hadn't even realized were knotted, she found herself talking. Not the careful, measured conversation she'd grown accustomed to at home, but real talking about her teaching, her students, her growing sense that she had lost herself somewhere along the way. You know, Leilani said softly as she worked on a particularly tight spot between Helda's shoulder blades, in Hawaiian culture, we have a concept called ho'oponopono. It means to make right, to restore balance. Sometimes that requires difficult choices, letting go of what no longer serves us. After the massage, Helda felt more relaxed than she had in years.
Her phone showed 3 more missed calls from Marcus, but instead of the usual anxiety spike, she felt something closer to indifference. Whatever crisis he wanted to discuss would have to wait. She spent the afternoon at Wailea Beach, initially self-conscious about being alone among couples and families, but gradually losing herself in the simple pleasure of warm sand between her toes and turquoise water that felt like silk against her skin. She'd brought a book, something she hadn't read for pleasure in months, and found herself absorbed in the story of a woman who left her comfortable but unfulfilling life to start over in a small coastal town. The parallels weren't lost on her. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Helda made her way to the resort's beachfront restaurant for the dinner reservation she'd made for 2. The hostess, a young woman with kind eyes, seated her at a table for 1 by the water's edge without any awkward questions or pitying glances. Halfway through her macadamia-crusted mahi-mahi, her phone rang. This time, it wasn't Marcus, it was her principal, Dr. Sarah Martinez. "Helda, I hope I'm not interrupting your vacation. I just wanted to call personally because we received the most wonderful news today." "Oh." I set down her fork, concerned. "Is everything okay with my class?" "More than okay. The district just informed me that you've been selected for the Teacher Excellence Award for your work with struggling readers. It comes with a $5,000 grant to develop your own reading intervention program, plus the opportunity to present your methods at the State Education Conference in Denver this fall." Helda nearly dropped her phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "The Teacher Excellence Award, Helda. Out of 15,000 teachers in the district, they chose you. The committee was particularly impressed with your work with students like Sophia Chen and the measurable improvements you've achieved. This is a huge honor and well-deserved." As Dr. Martinez continued explaining the award details, Helda felt something shift inside her chest. Here was recognition for work that mattered. Acknowledgement of skills she'd developed and impact she'd made. It was everything she'd never received at home. Appreciation, respect, belief in her capabilities. "The only thing is," Dr. Martinez continued, "they need an answer by Monday about whether you'll accept. I know you're on vacation, but I didn't want you to miss this opportunity." After hanging up, Helda sat staring at the ocean as waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. A teaching award. Recognition for her real work, her actual talents. The grant money would let her expand her reading program, help even more children discover their potential. The conference presentation would establish her as an expert in her field. It was everything she dreamed of professionally, and Marcus had never even asked about her career goals. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Okay, I'm officially worried. Marcus called Mom asking if I'd heard from you. He says you're having some kind of breakdown in Hawaii. Call me." Before she could lose her nerve, Helda dialed her sister's number. "Helda? Thank God. What's going on? Marcus made it sound like you've completely lost your mind." "Maybe I have." Then she found herself laughing at her sister's shocked silence. "Rachel, can I ask you something? Do you remember what I was like in college? Before Marcus?" "You mean when you were fun? When you had opinions about things and didn't apologize for existing?" "Yeah, I remember that, Helda. I've missed her." The words hit like a physical blow. Not painful, but clarifying. "What happened to her?" "You got married to someone who needed you to be smaller so he could feel bigger. Mom and I talked about it at your wedding, actually. We were worried, but you seemed so sure." "I was sure. I thought being chosen by Marcus meant I was worth something. I thought his family's approval would make me, I don't know, legitimate somehow." "Helda, you are already legitimate. You've always been the strongest person I know. You just forgot for a while." They talked for an hour, and with each minute, Helda felt pieces of herself clicking back into place. Rachel reminded her of the woman who tutored struggling students for free in college, who had organized fundraisers for underprivileged schools, who had once driven 6 hours through a snowstorm to be there for when Rachel's boyfriend broke up with her. "That woman is still in there. She's just been hiding," Rachel said softly. When they hung up, Helda knew what she had to do. She called the airline and changed her return flight, extending her stay by 3 days. Then she called Dr. Martinez's voicemail and left a message accepting the Teacher Excellence Award. Finally, she called Marcus. Jesus, Helda, I've been trying to reach you all day. Mom's still in the hospital, and I've been going crazy with worry about both of you. Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Okay, his voice was wary. I'm staying in Hawaii for the rest of the week. I'm going to think about what I want my life to look like, and when I come home, we're going to have a serious conversation about our marriage. What kind of conversation? The kind where I stop apologizing for having needs and you start treating me like an equal partner instead of a convenience. Hilda, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. I keep hearing that. But what if this is exactly like me? What if the person you married was just me trying to be what I thought you wanted? The silence stretched between them across thousands of miles of ocean. Are you saying you want a divorce? Marcus's voice was small, uncertain. I'm saying I want a marriage, a real one, where both people matter equally, where I don't have to choose between your mother's feelings and my own, where my career and dreams are as important as yours. I don't understand what's brought this on. That's part of the problem, Marcus. You don't understand because you've never tried to. After she hung up, Helda stood on her lanai, watching the moonlight dance on the water. For the first time in her adult life, she had spoken her truth without apologizing for it. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something stronger, a growing sense that she deserved better than she'd been accepting. Tomorrow, she would start figuring out exactly what better looked like.
The second morning of Helda's extended stay began with a jarring wake-up call that shattered her newfound peace. Her phone rang at 5:47 a.m. Hawaii time, which meant it was nearly noon in Colorado, and Marcus's mother's contact photo filled the screen. Against her better judgment, Helda answered. Helda Marie McDaniels Thompson. Eleanor's voice cut through the receiver like a blade, using Helda's full married name like a weapon. I am calling from my hospital bed to tell you that your selfish behavior has landed me in the cardiac unit. The doctors say my stress levels are off the charts, and it's all because my son is worried sick about his wife gallivanting around Hawaii like some kind of... Like some kind of what, Eleanor? Helda found herself asking, her voice steadier than she felt. Like a woman with no sense of responsibility to her family. Marcus hasn't slept in 2 days. He's calling in sick to work, missing important meetings because he's so distraught. And for what? So you can play pretend at being independent? The old Helda would have crumbled under this assault, would have immediately booked the next flight home while apologizing profusely. But something had crystallized in her during yesterday's conversations. Instead of guilt, she felt a surprising surge of anger. Eleanor, I'm sorry you're not feeling well, but I'm not responsible for your blood pressure any more than I'm responsible for Marcus's inability to handle his wife taking a vacation she planned and paid for herself. The gasp on the other end of the line was audible. How dare you speak to me that way? I have been nothing but welcoming to you since the day Marcus brought you home. Welcoming? Helda stood up and walked to her lanai, needing the sight of the ocean to ground her. You've criticized everything from my cooking to my career to my family background. You've made it clear that I'm not good enough for your son at every opportunity. That's not welcoming, Eleanor. That's territorial. I am hanging up this phone right now, and when you come to your senses and return home, you will owe me an apology. I'm not coming home early, and I'm not apologizing for finally standing up for myself. The line went dead, leaving Helda shaking with adrenaline. She'd never spoken to Eleanor that way, had never spoken to anyone that way. Part of her felt exhilarated, but a larger part felt terrified. She'd just burned a bridge there was no rebuilding. Her hands trembling, she called her school's substitute coordinator, Mrs. Rodriguez, knowing she needed to extend her personal leave. Helda? Is everything all right, honey? You sound upset. I'm fine, Mrs. Rodriguez. I just need to extend my time off through Friday. I know it's last minute. Don't you worry about that. After what Dr. Martinez told me about your award, you deserve some celebration time.
That substitute teacher who's covering your class, Jenny Walsh, she's doing wonderfully with your lesson plans. Your kids are in good hands." The kindness in Mrs. Rodriguez's voice nearly brought Helda to tears. Here was someone who supported her choices without drama or manipulation, who celebrated her achievements instead of making her feel guilty for them. After hanging up, Helda realized she was hungry, but dreading the prospect of another solo restaurant meal. The previous evening's dinner had been beautiful, but she'd noticed the pitying glances from other diners, the way servers spoke more slowly as if she might not understand the menu without a man to explain it. Instead, she decided to venture beyond the resort. The concierge, a cheerful man named Keone, suggested a local farmer's market in Kihei, where she could experience real Maui away from the tourist areas. "You want to understand Hawaii, you gotta eat where the locals eat," he said with a warm smile. The drive to Kihei in her rental car, a bright red Jeep Wrangler she'd upgraded to on impulse, was terrifying at first. She hadn't driven alone anywhere farther than the grocery store in years. Marcus usually handled all the driving when they went anywhere together, claiming she was too nervous behind the wheel. But as she navigated the winding coastal road with the Pacific on one side and volcanic mountains on the other, she remembered that she'd actually enjoyed driving before her marriage. She'd driven cross-country alone after college graduation, had taken spontaneous road trips with friends. The Kihei Farmers Market was a riot of colors, sounds, and smells that assaulted her senses in the best possible way. Local vendors hawked everything from dragon fruit to handmade jewelry, and the air was thick with the scent of grilled onions and exotic spices. For the first time since arriving in Hawaii, she felt invisible in a good way, just another tourist exploring, not a woman abandoned by her husband. At a booth selling fresh poke bowls, she struck up a conversation with the vendor, a woman named Nalani, who had moved to Maui from the mainland 15 years earlier. "What brought you here?" Helda asked as Nalani assembled a bowl with ahi tuna, avocado, and seaweed.
"Divorce," Nalani said matter-of-factly. "Caught my husband cheating with my best friend, took my settlement money, and bought a one-way ticket to paradise. Best decision I ever made." "Weren't you scared? Starting over somewhere completely new?" "Terrified," Nalani laughed. "But you know what scared me more? Staying in a life that was slowly killing my spirit. I figured if I was going to be miserable, at least I could be miserable somewhere beautiful." As Helda ate her poke bowl at a picnic table overlooking the ocean, she found herself thinking about Nalani's words. How long had her own spirit been slowly dying? When had she stopped noticing? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mom's doctor wants to talk to you. This has gone too far." Instead of responding, she blocked his number. The action felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. In 2 days, she'd hung up on her husband, spoken truth to his mother, and now cut off communication entirely. Each step felt necessary, but the accumulation of burned bridges was beginning to weigh on her. That afternoon, she attended something she'd never done alone, a snorkeling excursion to Molokini Crater. The boat was full of couples and families, and as they fitted her for flippers and a mask, she wondered if she was making a mistake. What if she panicked in the water? What if something went wrong and no one noticed because she was alone? But as the boat approached the crescent-shaped volcanic crater, her anxiety gave way to wonder. The water was so clear she could see tropical fish swimming 30 feet below the surface, and when she finally slipped into the ocean, she found herself in an underwater paradise unlike anything she'd ever imagined. Swimming among parrotfish, angelfish, and sea turtles, Helda experienced something she almost forgotten existed: pure joy. Not happiness dependent on someone else's approval or mood, but joy that came from within, from being fully present in a moment of beauty. When she surfaced, gasping and laughing, a fellow snorkeler, a woman about her age traveling with her teenage daughter, swam over. "First time?" the woman asked. "Yes, and I can't believe what I've been missing. I'm Diana, and this is my daughter Chloe. We do this trip every year, just the two of us. It's our tradition." As they floated in the crystal-clear water, Diana told Helda about her own journey to solo travel.
Started after my divorce 5 years ago. I was so used to doing everything as part of a couple that I'd forgotten how to make decisions for myself. The first trip was terrifying, but now I wouldn't trade this independence for anything. How did you get past the fear? Helda asked. I realized the fear of staying the same was bigger than the fear of changing. And you know what? Every scary thing I've done since then has led to something amazing. That evening, back at the resort, Helda video called Rachel. Her sister's face lit up when she saw Helda's sun-kissed cheeks and bright eyes. You look different, Rachel said. Happier, more like yourself. I feel different. I went snorkeling today, and I drove to a farmer's market, and I told Elamar exactly what I thought of her behavior. You did not. Rachel's mouth fell open. What did she say? She hung up on me after telling me I owed her an apology. Oh, and I blocked Marcus's number. Helda. Rachel looked both shocked and proud. I mean, good for you, but are you sure you're ready for the consequences of all this? The question hit home. Helda wasn't sure of anything, except that she couldn't go back to being the woman who apologized for taking up space. But the weight of what she was potentially losing, her marriage, her security, the approval she had worked so hard to maintain, was beginning to settle on her shoulders. I don't know, she admitted, but I know I can't keep living the way I was. Even if I don't know what comes next, I know what I'm leaving behind isn't working. As she ended the call and prepared for bed, Helda realized that learning to live authentically was like learning to swim. Terrifying at first, requiring trust in her own ability to stay afloat, but ultimately opening up an entire world she'd never known existed. The question was whether she'd have the courage to keep swimming when the water got deeper.
Helda's fourth morning in paradise began with an email that made her blood run cold. The sender was Dr. Sarah Martinez, and the subject line read, "Urgent. Please call immediately regarding your position." Her hands shook as she opened it. "Helda, I've received some concerning communications regarding your current leave status. Marcus called the district office yesterday claiming you're having a mental health crisis and are unfit to return to teaching. He's requested that we place you on mandatory psychiatric leave pending evaluation. I need to speak with you immediately. The situation is escalating beyond what I can handle at the school level." The resort rooms spun around her. Marcus was trying to have her declared mentally incompetent. The teaching award, her career, her financial independence, everything she'd worked for was under attack. She called Dr. Martinez immediately, despite the early hour. "Helda, thank goodness. I've been fielding calls since yesterday afternoon. Your husband contacted Superintendent Williams directly, claiming you've had some kind of breakdown and are making irrational decisions. He's provided what he calls evidence of erratic behavior." "What kind of evidence?" Hilda's voice came out as a whisper. "Screenshots of text messages, photos of your Instagram posts, and a statement from his mother about your increasingly unstable behavior. He's also claiming you've been missing work without authorization and that you threatened his mother when she was hospitalized." The manipulation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Marcus had weaponized her newfound independence, reframing every act of self-advocacy as evidence of mental illness. It was a strategy Eleanor had probably orchestrated. Discredit Helda's capacity to make decisions, and everything could go back to the way it was. "Dr. Martinez, I extended my leave through proper channels, Mrs. Rodriguez approved it, and I never threatened Eleanor. I just refused to apologize for taking a vacation I paid for myself." "I believe you, Helda, but the district is in a difficult position. When a spouse claims a teacher is having a psychiatric emergency, we have protocols we have to follow. I'm required to inform you that you'll need to undergo a fitness for duty evaluation when you return, and your teaching duties are suspended pending the results." The words hit like physical blows. Suspended? Fitness for duty evaluation? Her students, her classroom, her award, all of it hanging in the balance because she dared to stand up for herself. How long do these evaluations take? Could be weeks, maybe months, depending on the psychologist's schedule and their findings. And Helda, I have to ask,
Are you okay? Because some of what Marcus described does sound concerning to someone who doesn't know the full situation. What did he tell you? That you've been acting erratically for months, that you abandoned him and his sick mother at an airport, that you've been posting strange messages on social media, and that you've become hostile and paranoid toward his family. He painted a picture of someone in crisis. Helda closed her eyes, seeing the trap Marcus had laid. Every moment of growth, every act of self-advocacy had been cataloged and reframed as pathology. Her teacher mind recognized the strategy. It was gaslighting on an institutional level. Dr. Martinez, I need you to understand something. For the past 2 years, I've been shrinking myself to fit into a marriage that required me to have no needs, no opinions, and no boundaries. What Marcus is calling a breakdown is actually me remembering who I am. But I understand why it looks concerning to people who only know the version of me that never challenged anything. After the call ended, Helda sat on her lanai, staring at the ocean, feeling more trapped than she had even in her worst moments at home. At least there, she'd known the rules of engagement. Now she was fighting a battle where her opponent was rewriting reality itself.
Her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown Colorado number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Mrs. Thompson? This is Dr. Janet Hoffman from Mountain View Psychiatric Associates. Your husband has scheduled an emergency evaluation session for you this Friday at 2 p.m. It's regarding your fitness to return to your teaching position. I'm in Hawaii until Saturday. I understand you're currently out of state, which your husband mentioned as part of his concern about your judgment. We can reschedule for Monday if needed, but I should inform you that delaying the evaluation could be seen as non-compliance by the school district. Another trap. Return early and prove Marcus's point that her independence was just a phase, or stay and risk being labeled non-compliant with mental health treatment. I'll be there Monday, Helda said, then hung up before Dr. Hoffman could respond. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety and anger. She tried to enjoy the resort amenities she'd paid for, but every activity felt tainted by the knowledge that Marcus was systematically dismantling her life back home. At the pool, she overheard a couple discussing their own marriage troubles, and the wife's words cut through her spiraling thoughts. The hardest part isn't deciding to leave. It's accepting that the person you love is willing to destroy you to keep you. That evening, Helda called her sister, Rachel, who was furious when she heard about Marcus's tactics. He's having you declared crazy? That's not just manipulation, Helda. That's abuse. Financial abuse, emotional abuse, and now he's trying to destroy your career. You need a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. And what if he's right? What if I am having some kind of breakdown? Maybe people don't just change like this at 26. Maybe something is wrong with me. Stop. Rachel's voice was sharp. That's exactly what he wants you to think. Listen to me. Do you feel crazy? I feel angry and scared and more alive than I have in years. That's not crazy, Helda. That's a weakening. But you need to protect yourself. Marcus is playing for keeps. That night, Helda did something she'd never done before. She researched divorce attorneys. The websites made it clear that in Colorado, mental health could be a factor in everything from asset division to custody decisions. If Marcus succeeded in having her declared mentally unfit, she could lose everything: her career, her home, her financial security. She was trapped in a nightmare where choosing herself had been redefined as choosing madness. The next morning brought another devastating blow. Her credit card was declined when she tried to pay for breakfast at the resort restaurant. Confused, she called the bank, only to discover that Marcus had frozen their joint accounts, claiming his wife was having a mental health emergency and making irresponsible purchases. Ma'am, your husband provided documentation from medical professionals stating that you're currently unable to make financial decisions. He's requested that all accounts be frozen pending a competency evaluation. Helda hung up and checked her personal checking account, the one she'd used to pay for the Hawaii trip. It had been her safety net, built up over months of tutoring and weekend jobs. The balance showed $347.23. Not enough to change her flight, not enough for a lawyer,
barely enough to eat for the rest of her stay. Sitting in the resort lobby, financially trapped and professionally sabotaged, Helda felt the full weight of what she was up against. Marcus hadn't just questioned her decisions, he had systematically attacked every pillar of her independence: her job, her money, her reputation, her mental health status. All of it now hung in the balance. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Eleanor, calling from someone else's phone. "I hope you're satisfied, Helda. Marcus is beside himself with worry. I'm back in the hospital with chest pains from the stress, and now you forced us to take drastic measures to protect you from yourself." "Protect me?" Helda cracked. "You've destroyed my career and frozen my bank accounts? We've intervened before you could do irreparable damage to your life and ours. Mental illness runs in families, dear. Perhaps it's time you acknowledged that you're not well." The gaslighting was so complete, so professionally executed, that for a moment Helda almost believed it. Maybe I was sick. Maybe normal people don't just burn down their entire lives over a canceled honeymoon. But then she remembered Sophia Chen, the little girl who couldn't read until Helda refused to give up on her. She remembered the Teacher Excellence Award, the recognition of her actual skills and impact. She remembered the feeling of swimming among sea turtles, of driving alone in paradise, of speaking her truth for the first time in years. Those weren't the actions of someone mentally ill. They were the actions of someone finally becoming mentally healthy. "Eleanor," Helda said quietly, "I know exactly what you and Marcus are doing, and I know why you're doing it. The question is, how far are you willing to go to control a woman who doesn't want to be controlled anymore? As far as necessary. You're family now, whether you like it or not, and family protects each other from making mistakes." The line went dead, leaving Helda alone with the crushing realization that she wasn't just fighting for her independence, she was fighting for her very identity, her right to exist as anything other than Marcus and Eleanor's version of who she should be. With $374 to her name and a psychiatric evaluation awaiting her return, Helda faced the darkest moment of her journey, the possibility that choosing herself might cost her everything she had ever worked for.
Helda sat on the cold marble floor of her resort bathroom at 3 a.m., her laptop balanced on her knees, desperately Googling how to fight a psychiatric evaluation ordered by spouse when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her college roommate's name, Jessica Warren, now Dr. Jessica Warren, a clinical psychologist in Seattle whom she hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Jess?" Helda's voice was hoarse from crying. "Helda, thank God you answered. Rachel called me. She's worried sick about you. She told me what Marcus is trying to pull with the psychiatric evaluation. As your friend and as a psychologist, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Jessica's professional voice cut through Helda's panic like a lifeline. First, what Marcus is doing has a name. It's called institutional abuse. He's weaponizing systems meant to protect people in order to control you. Second, you have more power than you think you do. "Jess, they've frozen my bank accounts. My job is suspended. I have $300 and a psychiatric evaluation that could destroy my entire life. How do I have any power?" Because truth has power, Helda, and I'm going to help you document it. When did you first start feeling like you needed to change things in your marriage? For the next 2 hours, Jessica walked Helda through a detailed timeline of her relationship with Marcus, asking specific questions that helped her see patterns she'd never recognized. When had Marcus first criticized her friendships? When had Eleanor's suggestions become commands? When had she stopped making decisions without checking with them first? Helda, what you're describing is textbook psychological abuse. Isolation, financial control, gaslighting, and now institutional manipulation. You're not having a breakdown. You're having a breakthrough from an abusive relationship. But what if Dr. Hoffman doesn't see it that way? What if she believes Marcus?
Dr. Hoffman is required to conduct an objective evaluation. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to walk into that appointment with documentation of everything Marcus has done, a clear timeline of events, and contact information for professional witnesses who can attest to your mental state. What professional witnesses? I've been isolated from everyone. Your principal, your teaching colleagues, your students' parents, and your substitute teacher, all people who've interacted with you professionally and can speak to your competence and stability. Plus, I'm flying to Denver tomorrow. Jess, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You're not going into that evaluation alone. I'm going to be there as your advocate, and I'm bringing documentation that will make Dr. Hoffman's job very clear. As the sun rose over Maui, Helda felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time since receiving Dr. Martinez's email, she wasn't drowning in panic. She had an ally who understood the system being used against her. That morning, she made a series of phone calls that would have terrified her a week ago. First, she called Dr. Martinez and requested written documentation of her teaching performance, her award nomination, and the timeline of her approved leave extension. Dr. Martinez, I have to ask, are you sure you want to fight this? The district prefers these situations to resolve quietly. If you're willing to seek voluntary counseling, we might be able to avoid the formal evaluation. Dr. Martinez, if I accept voluntary counseling for being mentally unstable, my teaching career is effectively over. I'd rather fight and lose than surrender without a battle. Next, she called Mrs. Rodriguez, who was shocked to learn about the evaluation. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You've been one of our most dedicated teachers for 2 years. I'll write a statement today. The hardest call was to Jenny Walsh, the substitute teacher covering her class. Mrs. Walsh, this is Helda McDaniels. I know this is unusual, but I need to ask if you've noticed anything concerning about my lesson plans or classroom management systems. Concerning? Mrs. McDaniels, your classroom is a dream to walk into. Everything is organized, your students adore you, and your lesson plans are the most detailed and thoughtful I've ever seen. Why would you ask that? When Helda explained the situation, Jenny was outraged. That's insane. You want me to write a statement? I'll write 10 statements. Your students have been asking for you every day, and I've had 3 parents specifically mention how much you've helped their children. By noon, Helda had secured written statements from 6 professional colleagues, detailed documentation of her teaching excellence, and a comprehensive timeline of Marcus's escalating control tactics. But the real breakthrough came when she called the one person she'd been avoiding, her mother. Helda? Honey, I was so worried when Marcus called saying you were having problems. He made it sound like you had some kind of nervous breakdown. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. When you met Marcus, what did you really think of him?
The pause was telling. Sweetie, you seemed so happy. That's not what I asked. What did you think of him?
I thought he was very controlling, and his mother was worse. But you insisted you loved him, and I didn't want to interfere. I figured you knew what you were doing. Why didn't you say anything? Because you had already started pulling away from us. You stopped calling as much, stopped visiting. When I tried to bring up concerns, you'd get defensive and say we just didn't understand him. I was afraid if I pushed too hard, I'd lose you completely. The conversation revealed another layer of Marcus's manipulation. He had successfully isolated her from her family by making them seem unsupportive, then used her family's silence as evidence that they didn't care about her choices. Mom, I need you to know that I'm not having a breakdown. I'm leaving an abusive marriage, and Marcus is trying to use the mental health system to force me to stay. Oh, honey, her mother's voice broke. What can I do to help? That afternoon, Helda received an unexpected visitor at the resort. Diana, the woman she'd met snorkeling, appeared at the pool with her daughter Chloe. I hope you don't mind, but Chloe insisted we check on you. You seemed upset when we ran into you at breakfast yesterday. Helda found herself telling Diana about the psychiatric evaluation, the frozen accounts, and Marcus's systematic campaign to discredit her independence. I went through something similar, Diana said quietly.
My ex-husband tried to have me declared an unfit mother when I filed for divorce. He claimed I was having a midlife crisis and making reckless decisions. Do you know what saved me? What? I documented everything. Every conversation, every threat, every attempt to undermine me. And I found professionals who would attest to my stability. It sounds like you're already doing that. Diana pulled out her phone and showed Helda a contact. This is Patricia Summers. She's a family law attorney in Denver who specializes in cases involving psychological abuse. She helped me, and she'll help you. She works on sliding scale fees for women in financial crisis. I can't afford an attorney. You can't afford not to have one. Patricia knows how to handle these evaluation situations. She'll make sure Dr. Hoffman understands the context of what's happening. That evening, Helda video called Patricia Summers from her resort balcony. The attorney was sharp, direct, and immediately understood the situation. What Marcus is doing is unfortunately common in contentious divorces. Abusers often escalate their control tactics when their victims try to leave. The psychiatric evaluation is a power play designed to intimidate you into compliance. Can they actually take away my career over this? Not if we handle it correctly. I'm going to coordinate with your friend Jessica and prepare a comprehensive defense. We'll present evidence of Marcus's abusive behavior patterns, your professional competence, and the timeline showing how his escalation correlates with your attempts at independence. What if Dr. Hoffman decides I'm unstable anyway? Then we appeal. But Helda, Dr. Hoffman is a professional. When she sees the full picture, your teaching awards, your colleagues' testimonials, the documentation of Marcus's manipulation tactics, she'll recognize what's really happening here. For the first time in days, Helda felt hope returning. As she ended the call and looked out at the Hawaiian sunset, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, she realized something profound had shifted. She was no longer a victim scrambling to defend herself against impossible accusations. She was a woman with allies, documentation, and a clear strategy for reclaiming her life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I hope you're ready to come home and get the help you need. This has gone on long enough. Instead of the usual anxiety spike, Helda felt something close to pity for him. He still thought this was a game he could win through manipulation and intimidation. He had no idea that she'd just assembled a team of professionals who understood exactly what he was doing and knew how to stop it. I'm ready, she texted back, just not for what you think. As she packed her suitcase that night, preparing for the battle ahead, Helda realized that her time in Hawaii had given her something more valuable than relaxation or self-discovery. It had given her the distance and clarity to see her marriage for what it really was, and the courage to fight for who she really was. The woman boarding the plane to Denver in the morning would be fundamentally different from the one who had arrived a week ago. Not because she had a breakdown, but because she had finally broken through.
Dr. Janet Hoffman's office in downtown Denver was nothing like the sterile psychiatric facility Helda had imagined. Warm earth tones, comfortable furniture, and fresh flowers created an atmosphere more suited to friendly conversation than clinical evaluation. But as Helda sat across from the middle-aged psychologist on that Monday morning, her heart still hammered against her ribs. Mrs. Thompson, Dr. Hoffman began, then paused at Helda's expression. I apologize. Would you prefer Ms. McDaniels? I see here that you've recently filed for legal separation. Ms. McDaniels. Yes, thank you. Dr. Hoffman's acknowledgement of her choice felt like the first victory of the day. Beside Helda sat Jessica Warren, who'd flown in from Seattle as promised, along with attorney Patricia Summers, who had insisted on being present despite Marcus's objections. I want to clarify something from the start, Dr. Hoffman said, consulting her notes. This evaluation was requested due to concerns about your fitness for duty as an educator. However, I've received extensive documentation from multiple sources that paints a very different picture than what was initially presented to me. She gestured to a thick folder on her desk. Testimonials from 6 colleagues, performance evaluations spanning 2 years, documentation of a recent Teaching Excellence Award, and detailed timelines of the events leading to this evaluation. This is unusual. Most people facing these evaluations don't come nearly so well prepared. I had help, Helda said, glancing gratefully at Jessica and Patricia. For the next 2 hours, Dr. Hoffman conducted what felt more like a therapeutic conversation than an interrogation. She asked about Helda's teaching philosophy, her methods for helping struggling readers, her plans for the grant money from her award. She explored Helda's decision-making process in Hawaii, her reasons for extending her stay, and her future goals. "Tell me about your marriage," Dr. Hoffman said eventually. "Your husband's documentation suggests significant changes in your behavior over recent months." "There have been changes," Helda admitted. "I've started setting boundaries. I've begun expressing my own opinions. I've stopped automatically deferring to my husband and his mother's preferences. If those changes seem dramatic, it's because I was living in a way that required me to have no authentic self." Dr. Hoffman nodded thoughtfully. "Can you give me specific examples?" Helda shared the story of the Hawaii trip, how she'd planned and saved for it, how Eleanor had inserted herself, how Marcus had abandoned her at the airport. She described years of small compromises that had eroded her sense of self, the gradual isolation from friends and family, the constant criticism disguised as helpful suggestions. "And when you chose to continue to Hawaii alone, how did that feel?" "Terrifying, but also like I was finally doing something honest, something true to who I actually am." Jessica leaned forward. "Dr. Hoffman, from a clinical perspective, what Helda is describing is recovery from a psychologically abusive relationship. The behaviors her husband has labeled as concerning are actually signs of healthy individuation and boundary setting." Dr. Hoffman turned to Patricia. "Ms. Summers, you specialize in family law involving psychological abuse. What patterns do you see here?" "Classic institutional manipulation. When an abusive partner realizes they're losing control, they often escalate to using external systems, employers, medical professionals, financial institutions, to regain that control. The timing of this evaluation coinciding with Helda's first acts of independence is not coincidental." After Jessica and Patricia left for the waiting room, Dr. Hoffman spoke privately with Helda for another hour. The questions became more personal, more nuanced. "Helda, if this evaluation clears you to return to teaching, what will you do about your marriage?" "I've already filed for separation. I can't go back to being someone I'm not, and Marcus can't love who I actually am. We're fundamentally incompatible." "Are you concerned about the financial implications, the social consequences?" "I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life apologizing for existing. I'd rather struggle as myself than live comfortably as someone else's version of who I should be." Dr. Hoffman made notes, then looked up with something that might have been admiration. "You know, in 15 years of conducting these evaluations, I've rarely seen someone with such clear self-awareness about their motivations and goals. Your husband painted a picture of someone impulsive and unstable. What I see is someone who made carefully considered decisions about their life and is prepared to face the consequences." 3 days later, Dr. Hoffman's report arrived via email. "Following comprehensive evaluation, I find no evidence of mental illness, cognitive impairment, or instability that would affect Ms. McDaniels' fitness for duty as an educator. The changes in her behavior appear to represent healthy adaptation and boundary setting in response to a difficult personal situation. I recommend immediate reinstatement to her teaching position."
The report's language was clinical, but its message was clear. Helda wasn't crazy. She was simply someone who had decided to live authentically, regardless of the cost. Dr. Martinez called within an hour of receiving the report. "Helda, I owe you an apology. The district is prepared to reinstate you immediately with back pay for the days you were suspended. Your Teacher Excellence Award ceremony is next Friday. I hope you'll be there to accept it in person." That evening, Helda sat in her new studio apartment, a tiny space she'd rented with Patricia's help, using the advance payment from her teaching award. It wasn't much, but every item in it was something she'd chosen herself. The walls were painted a warm yellow that Eleanor would have hated. The bookshelves were filled with novels she'd wanted to read. The small kitchen table was set for one, without apology. Her phone rang. It was Rachel, calling from Portland. "I saw the news about your evaluation results. Mom told me you passed with flying colors. How are you feeling? Free, Helda said, surprising herself with how easily the word came. Scared, but free. Marcus called Mom, by the way. He wanted to know if we thought you'd come back if he and Eleanor apologized. What did she tell him? That the daughter they raised doesn't accept apologies from people who tried to destroy her life when she disagrees with them. I was pretty proud of her, actually. The divorce proceedings took 6 months, during which Marcus and Eleanor made several attempts to reconcile, each one involving promises to do better, while simultaneously suggesting that Helda was overreacting to normal family dynamics. But Helda had learned to recognize manipulation, and she held firm. On a crisp October morning, Helda stood before 500 educators at the Colorado State Teaching Conference, delivering her presentation on innovative reading intervention strategies. The woman at the podium bore little resemblance to the one who had stood in Denver International Airport 8 months earlier, abandoned and alone. This woman spoke with confidence about her methods, fielded questions with expertise, and accepted praise without deflection. She wore a dress she'd chosen because she liked how it looked, not because someone else approved of it. Her wedding ring was gone, replaced by a small silver band her grandmother had left her. The most important thing we can teach struggling readers, Helda told the audience, is that their worth isn't determined by how well they fit into someone else's expectations. Every child has a unique way of learning, a unique perspective to offer. Our job is to help them discover their own voice, not to make them speak in ours. The standing ovation that followed felt like vindication, not just of her teaching methods, but of her decision to reclaim her own voice. After the presentation, a young teacher approached her. Miss McDaniels, your story about Sophia Chen really resonated with me. I have a student who reminds me of her, so convinced she's not smart because reading is hard. Do you have any specific advice? See her potential before she can see it herself, and never give up on helping her recognize it. Sometimes the most important thing we can teach someone is that they deserve to take up space in the world. That evening, Helda returned to her small apartment and found a card slipped under her door. It was from Sophia Chen, now in 5th grade and reading at a 7th grade level. The cover showed a girl reading under a tree, and inside, in careful handwriting, Sophia had written, Dear Miss McDaniels, I heard you won a big award. I'm not surprised. You taught me that being different isn't the same as being wrong. Thank you for not giving up on me. Love, Sophia. Helda sat on her yellow couch in her chosen life, holding the card and thinking about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. The journey from the airport in Phoenix to this moment had cost her a marriage, financial security, and the approval of people she'd once desperately wanted to please. But it had given her something infinitely more valuable, herself. Outside her window, the Colorado sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, just like the one she'd seen from an airplane window 8 months earlier, when she'd first decided to choose her own path. The view was different now, but the beauty was the same, and this time she wasn't running towards an unknown future. She was living fully in the present she'd created, one authentic choice at a time. Helda McDaniels had finally come home to herself.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.